Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I'm going to be reviewing 4 books. Unfortunately, all 4 of them are DNFs. I did set a goal this year to not DNF, do not finish no more than 1 book off my 24 books to read in 2024 list, but I am already 2 out of 2 for DNFs. And kind of, the reason why I did not want to DNF so many books this year is because I want to be able to give a book a very fair review, because you never know, maybe the end of the book will completely change how I feel about the book. That has happened with a few books. But just the problem is I am a very slow reader and I have other stuff I would like to do, like especially writing. I have been very productive writing recently, and also things like interacting with my bird and playing video games. I don't really want to spend months really reading a book that I know I am just not liking and wind up hating anyway, and just waste 3, 4, 5, 6 months trying to read that book, trying to finish that book, and hate it anyway. So I've kind of come to the decision that I am just going to go ahead and admit that I DNF books. If I'm not liking a book after 75 pages, I probably won't like it. So I would like to be able to finish books so I could give very fair reviews. But if I were to do that, I would just not read very much at all. So I think I'm just going to have to DNF a book if I am not enjoying it after 75, 100 pages, and move on to another book that I might enjoy. So, beginning with the first book. This is a book off the top 1000 list, 1000 books to read before you die by James Mustich, but it was not on my 24 books to read in 2024. And it is Fyodor Dostoevsky, Notes from Underground. So another booktuber really wanted to hear my opinion on this book because apparently he probably really likes it. So I have never read, I think, a Dostoevsky book before. I do have a copy of Crime and Punishment because that is a book on the top 1000 list as well. And I do kind of like Russian writers because Russian writers are kind of similar to my own books because we tend to have a lot of characters and in the end everyone dies. So it's just kind of miserable, bad, sad endings with death and what was the point of this whole thing when everyone died anyway? They failed, so why did I read all this? That's kind of what a lot of Russian writers do, and that's how a lot of my books are as well. So I kind of like Russian writers. So I did enter it with a degree of enthusiasm, especially because this book was kind of requested by another booktuber. I really wanted to give this book every chance in the world. I did not want to DNF this book. So I began reading it, not having any clue what it is about whatsoever. And I got really probably about 20, 25 pages in, and I just really couldn't read anymore. I just did not like or care about this guy. And when I say I did not like him, there's different ways of not liking a character. For instance, the one I want to use is Joffrey from Game of Thrones. Joffrey is a character everyone does not like him, but he is actually a good character because he creates a major reaction for readers or for viewers. They want to see this guy get his comeuppance. They do not like him, but they are invested in him. They care about him for that reason. He is actually a very good character. He's a compelling character. He gets fans invested into the story. That is different from a character who you don't like, in which you just do not care about them. So you don't care if something good happens to them. You don't care if something bad happens to them. You're just not interested in the dude. And that is how I felt about this guy. So this guy is like a retired government worker, and he's just kind of meant to be like this miserable guy who just, I don't know, he just like hates the world, or he hates people, or he hates himself, or whatever. So the book is just like his reminiscing, like, you know, oh, dear readers, you think I am just angry and whatever. Then he goes on and he talks directly to readers like that. Like, ladies and gentlemen, I know you may think that I am trying to be funny or whatever. And he just keeps going on and on. And I just do not care about a single thing this guy says. He is not saying anything interesting. One thing that I think kind of hurts this book is the previous person who had this book like underlined certain passages, and they underlined a lot. And so when I come to a line and it's underlined, I can clearly see the person who read this book before me like picked out those lines like, ooh, that's a good line. And they like wrote notes in it. Like there's one line where he says something like, people are not responsible for their actions, or something like that. And so the person underlined it and wrote like, does he think he is not responsible for his actions? And I am just still reading this and just thinking, who cares? This guy is not saying anything interesting whatsoever. So I'm just not into it. I do not feel it. I do not care about this dude. I do not care about what he has to say. I do not think he is saying anything interesting in the least. So unfortunately, I just didn't like this book. I couldn't get into it. So sorry to the other booktuber. This book just did nothing for me. Did not like this guy. Did not care about him. Did not care about anything he had to say. And in terms of writing, I thought it was nothing special whatsoever. Especially all the like fourth wall breaks, like talking directly to readers, like, oh, ladies and gentlemen, you may think that whatever. I'm just like, no, I'm not thinking any of that. I'm not thinking anything. You're not saying anything. I do not care about you, dude. So that's my opinion of the book. Real unfortunate. I'm sorry to the other booktuber. I just didn't like it. Okay, the next book. This is a genre that I'm actually kind of getting increasingly interested in. But it's Virgil, the Aeneid. And the reason I say I'm kind of getting interested in it is because I have read a lot of like Greek playwrights at this point, like Aristophanes and Aeschylus, and my favorite was Sophocles. I really liked him. So Virgil is, I think, an ancient Roman writer. And so what this story is about, the Aeneid, is basically it is a continuation of Homer's The Iliad, the like fall of Troy. And so what Virgil did, this Roman writer, is he made up this story about how this character from the Iliad, a Trojan, like goes on this journey after the fall of Troy, and he like goes down to Carthage, and then he goes up to Rome and like founds Rome. So basically in the story, the Romans are like descended from the former Trojans, which is very interesting. But basically, as I read it, one thing that really bothered me was that all of the gods were Roman gods, and they were just clearly ripoffs of the Greek gods. Like, instead of having it be Zeus, it's Jupiter, and instead of, I think, Hera, it is Juno, and instead of who is the god of war, Ares, it's Mars, and then instead of like Athena, it's is it Venus? Or no, is that Aphrodite? That's probably Aphrodite. But anyway, I just didn't like that, because it's like, dude, you're just ripping off the Greek gods. Come up with your own gods. Quit ripping off the Greeks. So that bothered me. And as I was reading it, I was like, no, Jupiter was not involved in the fall of Troy. Zeus was, and it wasn't Juno. It was, you know, that was just bothering me. And also kind of as a writer, I just didn't like that he was ripping off Homer. I mean, I can appreciate that he's like doing a spin-off of it or a continuation of it, but to me, it's just ripping it off. So, I don't know. I just really, I guess, didn't like the fact that it was Roman. I just don't really like the Romans. It's just doesn't seem right. I like all the Greek gods and all the Greek characters, and just having this Roman guy trying to like steal the Trojan story and basically incorporate that. So now he's beyond just stealing all the Greek gods. Now he's stealing all the Greek legends. And something else that was really weird to me is that the Romans are like a militant group, right? They're really into their military and military conquest and all that. So why would they want to have this story where they are descended from the Trojans? The Trojans lost. So why would you want to be like, ooh, we are Trojans? Hello, the Trojans lost. They were defeated. Why do you want to be the Trojans? Doesn't that like speak bad about Rome? Like you are going to wind up falling just like the Trojans. It's in your destiny. It's in your nature. You are going to fall just like Troy. The Trojans are losers. They're weak. Why would the Romans want to like take over and emulate and think they are Trojans? That's just weird to me. So anyway, it had potential for sure. One thing I do have to say is when you're reading a translated work, the translator's never really able to do the original author justice. And I think Virgil actually died before he completed this story. And something else is he actually wrote this kind of like as a poem. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's like something about like the metric whatever about the words, like it has something to do with like so many syllables, like each line is so many syllables or something, and like each, the syllables rhyme and whatever. And with this it kind of reads more just like a novel, so you definitely do not get that. You do not get the rhyming structure of the syllables or whatever. So I can understand from that standpoint that is definitely makes it more like artistic. But in the translation, I don't get that at all. So that just doesn't come through at all. So I can't say like, oh man, that's such good writing to come up with that flow, that musical, lyrical quality. You don't get that in the translation. And again, Virgil died before finishing it. So, from that standpoint, I understand I am not reading Virgil's The Aeneid. I am reading this translator's attempt to put it into modern words and to make it readable for modern readers. So, I definitely want to point that out. It would be probably very different reading this actually in Latin or whatever. Completely different experience, and you would get a lot more out of it that way. So I am reading just kind of a knockoff of the Aeneid, but I just didn't really like it. Next is a book off my 24 books to read in 2024, and this was my least anticipated book of the year, and apparently for good reason, because I did not really like it at all. But it is off the top 1,000 list. It is John Casey, Spartina. So I did not know anything about this book before reading it. I'd never heard of the book or the author before. And on the cover, there's a picture of a boat. So apparently, it has something to do with a boat. So as I began reading it, the first chapter, I thought, hey, this could actually be a pretty good book. This could potentially even be a 5-star book. I mean, it's just overall decent writing, decent storytelling. It's basically about this fisherman who is, kind of this struggling middle-class guy. And like in his backyard, he is building this boat, which is meant to be like, his gold mine, sort of. Like this is his life's work, is building this boat. Something that kind of bothers me about that for this book is I just think this cover doesn't do it justice, because like the boat on this cover looks like just like a poor man's Noah's Ark. Like, this book is set in the modern-ish day, so it's not like this is written in like 1700s or something, when this quality of boat would actually be, relatively decent. I mean, this is like the modern day with like speedboats and stuff. And this guy is like building this boat that looks like a poor man's Noah's Ark. And that is his life's work. I mean, I wouldn't buy that for like $100. And so, I don't know, I just... the cover just doesn't really do that justice to me. It's like, that is not really like a life's work right there. That is more like a poor roadside attraction or something. Who would buy that? Anyway, so as I was reading the book, after a couple chapters, I was just really not liking this pacing at all, like the storytelling or whatever. For instance, it came to a chapter where several characters, like 10 different characters or something, were on this boat and they were like being taken across the bay or something. And I didn't really get like who all these people were, where they were going, or why. And so what it had in the book is just be like, it would switch to one of the characters and it'd kind of go into like the backstory of that character. And it would say like, you know, one day this happened with this character. And then it would just jump back ahead. And then the character, you know, there'd be a line like, you know, the character looked to another person, and then it'd go into that person, and it'd go into some other event from the past for that person. And it just wasn't seemingly connected with anything. It was just like words. And I didn't know who these characters were. I didn't know where they were going or why I should care. But same thing, it'd just be, here's this character and one day this happened, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything. It's just some random event from some random time before that doesn't have anything to do with what they are currently doing. And that character wouldn't have any impact on what is currently happening. Like that character that he's just describing doesn't say anything substantive to actually push the plot forward. It's just one day this random event happened with this random character, and now they're gone from the story for 100 pages. And another day this random event happened with this random character, and that character is gone for 30 pages. And another day this random event happened with this character, and that character is gone for 20 pages. So I just didn't care about it at all. The writing in this book, the words, did not push along the plot or characters at all. It did not develop plot or character. It was just words. I mean, that's all I can say about this writer. He wrote words, and they don't have any real meaning. They don't develop any kind of plot. They don't develop the characters. It doesn't make me care about this dude at all. And something I gotta point out is this the protagonist's name is Dick Pierce. And that is just pretty juvenile humor, like Dick Pierce. Like, haha, you get it? Wink, wink, wink. And so that's just juvenile. And another thing this author does that just bothers me to no end is he uses the character's name all the time. So he doesn't say he just repeatedly says Dick. So Dick looked over, Dick said, Dick voiced, Dick walked, whatever. Dick, 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 Dick. And it's just like, yeah, I get it. You want to say Dick because you get it, wink, wink. Just say he, but he doesn't do that. And it just drives me crazy. So there was that. Then there was other stuff as well. Like just, I didn't feel this dude at all. Like he has an affair with his woman and then she gets pregnant. Thank you, baby. This woman gets pregnant and then she's just like, oh, don't worry about the baby, I'll take care of it. And so the protagonist is just, oh, okay, sweet. It's just like, well, what's the point of that? And that's just not taking responsibility. You just don't do that. You don't get a woman pregnant and just have her say, oh, I'll take care of the baby, don't worry about it. Oh, okay, fine, cool. I didn't care about this dude, and it's supposed to be the story about this like middle class guy trying to get ahead and whatever. And I just didn't feel it at all. I didn't like this book at all. I didn't like the writing at all. I didn't think it pushed or developed the plot or characters. I didn't care about anyone in this book. He repeats the character's name all the time, saying Dick instead of just saying he. And the character's name is Dick Pierce. Wink, wink. I just didn't like this dude at all, so I don't like this writer at all. I didn't like this book at all, so I am not going to read anything else by this author. I am just done with it. It was my least anticipated read of 2024, and it was a 1-star book. I just didn't like anything about it, even though it had a good start. Like the first chapter, I thought, maybe decent. One final thing that bothered me about the book, a lot of people say like the best, like reading reviews of this book, people say like the best part about it is like describing the like fishing they go on, like crabbing especially, or like trying to catch lobster, going out on the sea. A lot of people thought that was like the highlight of this book. I don't really think so, because the only thing that happens when they do that is just like it says, like, we dropped the pots. And that just repeats like every single chapter. We dropped pots, and like we pulled up the pots. And I just didn't care. I mean, that doesn't like put me right there with them. And another thing is, I went vegetarian about almost 2 years ago. So I just do not want to read all this stuff about this character like catching lobster. I don't want him to catch lobster. I want the lobster to survive, you know? And so all this stuff like saying, you know, we went and we dropped the pots, or we're pulling up the pots. I was thinking, God, I hope they don't catch anything. So that's just me from like my, you know, fondness for animals or whatever. You know, I didn't want them to catch anything. Thank you, baby. What's the other thing? Catching lobster, catching pots, pulling up pots. Oh yeah, and the last thing. There is a line in this book, or maybe a few lines, where the characters are complaining how, like, it's getting increasingly harder to catch anything. Like, they have to go further out to sea because there's not as many crab or not as many lobster anymore. So they have to go out, you know, further, and whatever. It's getting harder to catch stuff. I was just like, well, maybe you are overfishing the area. Maybe you should give it a break. Maybe you should get a different job and let the population regrow instead of like fishing them all out of extinction or whatever. So that just kind of pissed me off. I did not have sympathy for this dude. Like, oh, you poor person, you're not catching as many lobster. Well, give them a chance to repopulate their species instead of catching them every day. So anyway, I just didn't like those scenes at all. Whenever I'd get to a scene where they're going out to lay pots, I just skipped that scene eventually because I didn't care. I didn't want them to catch anything. So I didn't like those scenes at all. Last, this was the second least anticipated book for me of 2024. It is part of, I think, a quadrilogy, a series of 4 books, and I unfortunately have all 4 books. I am not going to continue reading the series after this point. But anyway, it is Justine by, I pronounced it Lawrence Durrell, but someone told me I was pronouncing it wrong, so I don't know, Lawrence Durrell? I don't know. I have no clue. But anyway, I think this book is kind of trying to be like a modern Marquis de Sade, because Marquis de Sade, I don't know if I pronounce his name right, he wrote a book called Justine, which is about this, you know, well, de Sade, he's basically this real sexual writer. I mean, he's just writing about sex, real explicit stuff. And this book has a picture of a naked lady on the cover. But anyway, so even at the start of the book, there's like a quote from Justine by de Sade. And then as the book begins, it kind of, here's how the book goes. It'll be like, there's a sentence about Justine, and then words, 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 something about sex, words, 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 random character number 1, words, words, sex, words, words, random character number 2 or random character B, I don't know. Words, 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 something about sex. And that's just the way the whole book goes. I do not care anything about this setting. It's set in Alexandria, Egypt, which is supposed to be like a highlight of the book. I should probably put it down, just have a picture of a naked lady. Like, the setting Alexandria is said to be like, thank you, baby. The setting is said, I think the author said something like Alexandria is kind of meant to be the main character of the book, the actual city. But I wasn't getting the sense of the city at all. To me, it just wasn't even there at all. There's like one line at the start of the book, like, you know, saying something like, oh, the dusty city, and something like that, something along those lines, trying to describe it. But I wasn't feeling it at all. I just didn't get like feeling immersed in Alexandria at all. And then the characters, I wasn't invested in any of them. I didn't care about any of them. Even Justine, she was like the least interesting one, because I didn't know anything about this person. I didn't know why she was so central to the story. I didn't get why anyone like likes her or who she is or anything. This book was just words, 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 random character, words, words, some line about sex, words, 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 random character, words, words, sex, words, words. That's the whole book. And it wasn't anything interesting whatsoever. It was just real random, real sporadic. There was like no linear focus to the story. It wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't developing any of the characters. It wasn't developing the plot. It wasn't developing the setting. It was just words and occasionally some line about sex. And it wasn't even like Aeneid where it's like, wow, that's like really shocking what he just did. It's just be weird stuff. Like it'd be a line like something about like a woman, I don't know, just completely random lines. Like there was some line about like her wounded sex or something like that. Like just what does that even mean? So I don't know. This author, he just wasn't saying anything. Just much like the Dostoevsky book, I guess. It's just words. And really the same thing with Spartina. It's just words, 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 and random character. And it's not developing plot, story, character, setting, whatever. So anyway, it just didn't do anything for me. So I read probably around 75 pages trying to wait for something to happen, and it just never did. So I just wound up DNFing it. So that is it. So while I'm here, I may as well run through the books I'm currently reading. J.R.R. Tolkien, The Fellowship of the Ring. I am, I don't know, 125 pages into it. I kind of have mixed thoughts. Really, something that bothers me about this book is it's just taking so slow. Like from the time Frodo leaves the Shire to the time where he actually arrives at the gate of Bree, where he knocks on the door of the city wall and whatever, and let me in. There is like 100 pages that pass, and I mean there is just scenes where like the characters fight over or argue over who should take a bath first, and there's like 4 paragraphs about that. And then like all along there's just a lot of songs, so the characters are just like randomly like, oh, let's sing a song, and just they're way too cheery, like just constantly like exclamation point about something. They're just, I don't know. So I definitely think in a way the movie is better because it's just much better pacing, much better at telling a story and keeping the story moving. Whereas with this, it's just like randomly like, oh yeah, we're being hunted, but we're gonna all talk all merry and excited, and we're just having a jolly time, and let's sing, and the Black Riders are right over there like looking for us, but you know what, now's a good time to sing, so we're just gonna sing, and we're hobbits and we're having a good old time, and oh, forget we're on this journey, hey, let's argue over who to take a bath first. And it's just the pacing of the movie is a lot better. The tension of the movie is a lot better. It keeps it flowing. I understand, I respect J.R.R. Tolkien for coming up with all this. And, he has a lot of backstory involved. So there's a lot more details in the book than there is in the movie. But at the same time, there's a lot of details that are like, do we really need that? Like, do we need this backstory about like Farmer Megget or whatever? And just whatever, like what does that have to do with the ring? And yeah, so I don't know, there's issues with the book for sure. And yeah, next I actually started reading this book because I kind of figured it'd probably just be a quick DNF, and I don't know how many pages, about 40 pages into it. Rebecca West, Black Lamb and Gray Falcon. So I didn't know anything about this book whatsoever, but when I began reading it, the first chapter, I was like, ooh, this is actually pretty darn good. I do not know how I'll be able to give this less than a 5-star rating. And basically, as I was reading this book, the first thing, like I say, I didn't read about the book at all. So the first chapter is like talking about like kings or emperors from like Austria and Hungary in like the 1800s, and it's just talking about like you know, kind of their history of getting assassinated or whatever. And it also talks about like powerful women at the time and what they were doing. And I just found it really interesting because I do like history. So I didn't mind that it's kind of long passages where it's like, you know, in 1800, this emperor, you know, was around and this is what his story is. I kind of like that. And I do that in my own books as well. I go into like the history of like certain cities, wherever the book is located, or certain historical figures. So I like that. So then as I was reading last night, I actually looked this book up to see like what it actually is and who the author is, because I was increasingly thinking I'm actually liking this book. In spite of the length, I think this is actually well written and I'm liking it. So I looked it up and apparently this is a travel book about like Yugoslavia. So it's kind of actually based on true events, I guess, sort of. Like it is actually kind of autobiographical. And usually I do not like autobiographies. I feel like I'm talking a lot in this video. I apologize. But anyway, I do not usually like memoirs or autobiographies. But this doesn't really read so much like an autobiography. Like it, I mean, it is first person. So it is saying like, you know, I was in the hospital and I read this news article saying whatever. But I'm not really reading it so much as an autobiography. I'm kind of reading it more as a novel. And I kind of like that. And it's working for me. And I'm still liking it. So the word count, the page count, over 1,100 pages. 1,100 pages, not 1,100 pages. I'm liking it pretty well. The length is definitely a concern. So I may tire of it at some point. Which will probably start happening fairly soon. But I am definitely liking it for sure. I think there's definitely potential here. I like this writer's writing style. I like just the way she incorporates history. I like the way she describes characters. And I don't know, I'm just liking it overall. So the length is definitely a concern, but I'm liking it. So we'll see how far I get into it. I imagine I will wind up giving it a good review, even if I do quit on the book. If I quit on the book, it will probably be because of the length, and I'm just tired of reading it. But yeah, I am actually impressed with the writing and the storytelling, and that is all good. So I'm liking it so far. These next two I haven't actually started reading yet, but I am adding them to replace the books I DNF'd, Spartina and Justine. But first, my third least anticipated book of 2024 is Betty MacDonald, Anybody Can Do Anything. This is another book that I think is like a memoirs, and it's supposed to be like a it's supposed to be like a humor book. I am intrigued about it because there is a signed book by this author at the bookstore. And this is a top 1,000 book, by the way. Anybody Can Do Anything. So I'm kind of waiting to read this book and see if I like it. And if I do, I may buy the signed book, which is $100. But waiting on that. I don't want to buy a signed book for $100 and not like the author or whatever. So starting it soon. Next, another book I haven't began reading yet, and this is my fourth least anticipated book of 2024. Isaac Asimov, Foundation. I am not into sci-fi fantasy at all, and I do not actually know anything whatsoever about the series, so I do not know if this is like set in space or another planet or what. I do not know. I don't know anything about this series. I've never read anything by Isaac Asimov, but I know he is a very like popular fantasy author. So we'll see how it goes, starting it soon. Last is actually not a top 1,000 book, and it's not on my 24 books to read in 2024. I have been reading it for like 5-6 months or so, just making real slow progress. In fact, you can see how slow progress I make just by the marker. I'm only, how many pages in? 60 pages? Only 60 pages? I've been reading this for like 6 months. That's what I mean by I'm a slow reader. But it's The Cane Mutiny. The Cane Mutiny by Herman Wouk, and it's a signed copy, which I think is real sweet. I'm actually liking this book pretty well, and there are definitely scenes and parts where it's just good and I really like it. Like I really, anyway, I don't want to go into it. But I'm kind of impressed with this book and I'm liking it. I'm liking the pacing. I'm liking the characters okay. I'm liking some of the humor in the book. So I am liking it. It's unfortunate I'm making such slow progress on it. I'm just a slow reader and just have other things I would like to do. And the length is a concern. Like if I was close to finishing this book, I would read it more, but you know, there's over 450 pages and I'm only 40 pages in or whatever. Something that's kind of funny is I'm saying I am liking this book very much and I like that it's signed. But I think this book actually won a Pulitzer. And I am notoriously like, never have I read a book that won a Pulitzer that I've liked. And I'm actually liking this one. So I may break my Pulitzer hating streak. But I don't know, I'm just making such slow progress on it. Even though I'm liking it, it's just, I don't really feel motivated to read it. I would kind of wish to just put this book aside and read something that's a smaller book so I can have the satisfaction of finishing a book, because it's just kind of disappointing to me, discouraging to just see the stack of currently reading books for me and I'm only like 5% into them. I wish I was more like, 80% into a book. So that way I'd be like, ooh, I could finish this book today. But anyway, I am sorry I'm rambling so much in this video. I feel like I'm talking a lot. Anyway, I should probably stop doing that. I probably bored everyone out of their minds. I am sorry. I've been real wordy. Anyway, I'm going to stop now. Thank you guys for watching. Yeah, that's all. See you next time. Bye.
2, 3, 4.